Next, we're going to stick with the theme of infrastructure, and I'd like to welcome to the stage Samantha Silverberg, who's the Deputy Assistant to the President for Infrastructure Implementation in the Executive Office of the President, along with our panelist participants. Samantha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Our panelists include Tom Cormons, who's the Executive Director of Appalachian Voices, Colby Hall, the Executive Director of SOAR, which is the Shaping Our Appalachian Region in Kentucky, Leasha Johnson, the Executive Director of the Mingo County, West Virginia Redevelopment Authority, and Luke McGowan, the Director of Federal Initiatives, the Government Innovation in Bloomberg. Thank you all so much.
Oops, so sorry, Brian. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here again. Samantha Silverberg, joining you from the White House just across the way, where I help oversee the implementation of the President's bipartisan infrastructure law. We are so excited to be now 2.5 years into implementation of the infrastructure law, as well as the rest of the Investing in America agenda, over 60,000 infrastructure and clean energy projects all across the country, and so much more to come. So that's basically all I'm going to say, because we have an amazing panel who's here to really speak to how the President's agenda is shaping and reshaping their communities, how we're leaning on partnership and collaboration to overcome challenges. I really enjoyed talking to some of these folks last night as we prepped to hear about the remarkable work they're doing. So we're just going to get started, kind of go down the line. So Colby, I'll start with you. Can you just start by telling us a little bit more about yourself and the community and organization that you represent?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm Colby Hall. I'm the Executive Director of Shaping Our Appalachian Region. It's an honor to be here. Brian, thanks to you and Briggs and Katie and Samantha for the invitation to be on the panel. See a lot of Kentucky folks out in the audience today, so I feel like we're very, very well represented. And a couple days in D.C., and you're quickly reminded that your thoughts on traffic are very regionalized, right? Because this is a completely different animal up here. But Shaping Our Appalachian Region, SOAR, a lot of acronyms, but I feel like I'm in an audience that understands the acronym soup. We're a 501c3 regional nonprofit, have been around for about 10 years. We were formed shortly after the Great Recession, kind of when the coal industry in the eastern part of the state had its kind of final last piece of its decline, and a lot of community members began asking the most important question of what's next for this region that lost not just its primary industry, but really a big piece of its identity. And so fast forward to where we are today, we have a lot of broad-ranging programming and initiatives that generally, or they all, kind of fall down, Samantha, from what we see are the region's two biggest long-term challenges, which is population loss and labor force participation, specifically for prime age workers, so people that are 25 to 54. So excited to talk more, but that's us.
Thank you. Luke, same question to you. Can you give us who you are and what organization do you represent?
Yeah, happy to. And thanks for having me here, and good to see all of you. As Samantha said, I'm Luke McGowan. I'm with Bloomberg Philanthropies, where our mission is to ensure better, longer lives for the greatest number of people around the world. We really believe in doing this through a few different ways. We work on arts, public education, environment, government innovation, and what we are motivated by is Mayor Bloomberg. He was mayor of New York City, slightly bigger community than maybe some of the ones you're coming from, but he believes in the power of local government to confront the challenges we're facing. I kind of came to this work when I was just a kid. My mother passed away from breast cancer. She left, I was 10 years old. She left me and my 6 brothers and sisters and my dad. But my most vivid memory of that time is the community showing up for us. And I don't know if you can picture those glass trays of lasagna with the tinfoil over them. It was just a never-ending stream, not just from, friends and family and neighbors, but kind of the whole community, the schools, the town, and we ate a lot of lasagna in that time. But I bring that up because of something that was said yesterday about recognizing the replacement energy that's needed for the communities you're representing when they face loss. And what it made me think of is, yes, there is replacement energy, but there's also embodied energy in that place already that can be unlocked by kind of crisis and loss. And so that's what we're about. at Bloomberg is sort of recognizing that communities, especially small towns, there's a lot of resources out there, but they just need help getting them to unlock the capacity within those communities. So we'll talk more about it, but I'm working on the local infrastructure hub, which is really a platform to help towns, cities. Most of our participants have fewer than 50,000 people, kind of discover opportunities through the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, and then compete and apply and win those federal grants at scale. So that's where I'll leave it. Back to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Luke. Leasha, same question?
Thank you, Samantha, and thank you to Dr. Anderson and Briggs and the IWG for inviting me here on behalf of Mingo County, West Virginia, which is what is an area that used to be referred to as the heart of the trillion-dollar coal field. We are the Mingo County Redevelopment Authority is an economic development agency, but we've had this vision despite the fact that we were operating as an economic monoculture for decades, and that Mingo County was one of the top 3 coal producers in the state for decades. We have had a board of directors that fortunately was visionary enough to realize that we needed to be preparing ourselves for transition and for diversification. And so we've been extremely successful in in facilitating innovative partnerships with coal companies and land companies and regulatory bodies over the years, so that while coal was being produced and while coal was being mined, we were bringing in partnerships with federal regulatory agencies such as the Federal Highway Administration, the Corps of Engineers, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Federal Aviation Administration. So we have developed reusable sites while mining was taking place in order to prepare us for a post-coal economy. So we've prepared 15 miles of what will eventually be the I-73-74 corridor that run through 4 counties in southern West Virginia. We have created, through this land use master plan work that we've been doing and these partnerships we've created, a state-of-the-art general aviation airport. We've created, if you've never heard of the Hatfield-McCoy Trails, it was our work that created a world-class trail system. We have over 1,000 miles of trails that have really fostered some opportunity for entrepreneurial development in southern West Virginia. And several other recreational opportunities that have been the product of our ability to envision a post-coal future, and surprisingly, we were envisioning that more than 20 years ago. So our work, to Brian's point, everything is a long game in economic development, but we continue to work toward overcoming the barriers to transitioning away from, the coal economy that has been so good to us for so many years. Thank you.
Thanks, Leasha. And then last but absolutely not least, Tom Cormons from Appalachian Voices. Can you tell more about yourself and your organization, please?
Thank you. Yes, so happy to be here. So grateful to Brian and Briggs for bringing us all together here at yet another crucial moment. We have crucial moments every day in this work. But I'm Tom Cormons. I'm executive director at Appalachian Voices. Have been in that role since 2013. And we work on a just energy and economic transition across a 5-state Central Appalachian region, guided by a vision of an Appalachia with healthy, intact ecosystems and generative local economies that allow communities to thrive in balance with our region's incomparable natural heritage. So that's the overarching vision. Since 2015, we have been really vigorously digging in and engaged on energy and economic solutions for energy communities, coal communities in particular. And we've been doing that work both on the policy side and on the getting our hands dirty on the ground implementation side of things. And we see those 2 spheres of work as incredibly important in a complementary way, because when we speak to Congress, and we were very engaged in advocating for the kinds of investments that are allowing the federal government to give back at the level it currently is to energy transition communities that we see in the President's Invest in America agenda. When we advocate to Congress, when we speak with agencies, provide feedback, we're able to do that from the standpoint of working directly in communities to make generative projects happen. And so we see a positive feedback loop that we all need to work to maintain between great successful projects that essentially become the examples that then allow us to continue to advocate for more of this type of investment and sustained investment. Just a few words I'd like to put out here towards the top about the way we approach product development. We have been able to draw down funds from 8 agencies, many different funding sources. But it's not, of course, just about the money. It's about the community vision behind the money. And so we prioritize convening and engaging communities as step number 1, and then developing master plans for communities based on that engagement as step number 2, and only then thinking about, okay, stacking funding, and often there are increasingly great matches out there that can really, really move the needle. And capacity has come up so much in this conversation. I hope that we'll be able to dig in a bit more on the particular types of capacity that there's a dearth of, that we really need to sustain and increase to make these projects happen. But we as an organization will jump in wherever we can be helpful, whether it's grant writing, whether it's hiring the contractors, whether it's convening the conversations, whether it's speaking with the agencies. And then, very important, make sure that as we're putting these projects out there as generative replicable examples, that it's local voices, local spokespeople, who are really leading that communication.
Excellent. So thanks for the intros. Would love to really kind of go down to the ground level. So can you all share an example or two of a project or a success story where a community you're working with has been able to leverage some of the federal investments that are coming through the president's agenda? So Colby, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'll mention 2 things quickly, Samantha. One is, and this is, a lot of these projects are coming, obviously we're in a golden era of broadband funding, so I know a lot of folks are from rural areas that have struggled. The funding, it's just expensive. It's an expensive proposition at the onset. And so obviously Kentucky got $1.1 billion from the $65 billion, from the $42.25 billion, billions and millions. 100 million here, 100 million there, but that's going to be huge, right? And we have great existing broadband providers in the eastern part of the state. We're really, really lucky to have telephone cooperatives and locally owned telecommunication companies that have gotten the job started. And this money, will be as close to universal coverage as we've been, hopefully, in the next 5 to 7 years. Another quick one to mention: Bell County, Kentucky. The Lewis Ridge project, an $81 million OSED award, the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations from the Department of Energy. That was a really exciting announcement this year. I've been so fortunate to get to know the Redevelopment team that's doing that project, the OSED team, who was really, really great. Outside the room was pretty hot when we were in that finalist interview. It was like steamy down there, but we got through it, and that's a $1.3 billion project, and $81 million, that's going to go, that's a risk. It's the first new pump storage hydropower project in 30 years in the U.S., the only one ever done on, I think, active and abandoned mine land. So it's pretty complicated. It's a 100-year infrastructure, so it's going to be there forever. And they just needed a place that had 500 feet of elevation at least, water, and transmission lines. And so Bell County was a great fit for that. And it's going to create a bunch of jobs and give something back to the community that they have. I mean, they were a desirable location for that project, and so it was a huge win there. And credit to the Redevelopment team, the OSED team, because that funding, the last thing I'll say, Samantha, was so critical because there's a 3 or 4 year permitting process, and they have a ton of private investment lined up on the back end, and that's really going to de-risk that. So the $81 million, it's a small piece of the $1.3 billion, but it's going to go to that piece that the private money was going to deal with, but would rather be on the other side of the equation, when construction starts. And I think that project's going to be a huge success over the next 7 years as they get it built out. So I'll mention those 2.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. I just love the examples where we have smart public investment catalyzing private investment, because it de-risks, because it meets gaps that otherwise the private sector moving on their own would just not meet. So thanks so much for sharing that. Luke, could you share an example from a community that Bloomberg's working with?
Yeah, happy to. And again, kind of the main scaled resource support we have to local communities is called the Local Infrastructure Hub. It's free online technical assistance to any community. And we've helped over 1,500 communities around the country have participated. We've helped them pull down over $2 billion in federal funds through the Investing in America agenda. So it's hard to pick one win, but the one that jumped to mind for me is we work with Athens, Ohio, so southeastern Ohio, town of 20,000 people. And I was just with Mayor Patterson a few weeks ago. He got kind of the climate transition bug, was interested in electrical vehicle charging infrastructure, came to our session talking about the charging and fueling infrastructure grant program available through Department of Transportation. And when he started, so he kind of started getting information, we helped kind of him and other communities understand how to approach this grant application. He realized, and we helped his team adjust their grant, because what DOT was looking for was really a regional approach, and so it wasn't going to be enough just to say, let's build 2 chargers in Athens. And so through consultation with our team, one-on-one support, they ended up restructuring their application and applied and won a $12.5 million grant for essentially the entire region, a 54 charging infrastructure network that kind of tells the story of what lots of communities participating in our program learn, which is regional approach matters. Smaller communities shouldn't be afraid to apply. Just we'll help you kind of figure out what's going to make your application successful. And ultimately, it's not just about the dollars. It's about the actual project's going to be that much more valuable to the residents in the region of Southern Ohio. And so we're proud of that one.
Love that example. Leasha, I know you have a lot of examples, so
I
can you share a couple?
do, Samantha. We're a small county of only 23,000 folks, but when the president's initiative was first laid out, we wanted to aggressively apply for as much of the federal dollars as we possibly could. And while, we look forward to this public investment incentivizing private investment, we have also, on the back end of that, we have really leveraged the private investment to be eligible for the public investment. So, the airport that we're talking about, the coal company invested $35 million constructing the airport to rough grade so that the FAA could then come in and spend $10 million finalizing the project. On the section of highway that we built, it was a coal company investment of about $200 million that resulted in a nearly $75 million investment by the Federal Highway Administration. But, these development projects, as you can imagine, in West Virginia are on top of reclaimed mine sites. We have an industrial park that we've created as a reclaimed mine site. We've repurposed it. And getting infrastructure to these sites has been nearly impossible. We don't meet traditional infrastructure funding models. We ask for, $10 million to get infrastructure to the highway or to the airport, and they say you don't have end users. But we can't have end users if we don't have infrastructure. So, it was really the focus on assistance to coal communities through, primarily through the EDA, where we were able to secure 3 different funding awards, different grant awards in the last 4 years for water and wastewater treatment to the airport and to a 400-acre recreational site. We also, with a partnership with Coalfield Development Corporation, secured an AMLR award for $3.5 million, where we constructed a very innovative aquaponics facility in a small area in Mingo County that is considered a food desert. So we're producing commercial quantities of fish and fresh vegetables on a reclaimed mine site, where we were able to use that money to reclaim 4 abandoned mine portals that had been, this environmental detriment to the community for the last 20 years, and we're partially powering that aquaponics facility with solar power. And then we also, in partnership with American Electric Power, we're doing some really innovative work in extending broadband to every unserved part of Mingo County and Logan County, West Virginia. The power company was already hanging fiber as a result of their smart grid expansion, and they approached the Public Service Commission about the possibility of hanging additional strands of fiber so that it could be leased to an internet service provider. We applied for $19 million worth of supplemental dollars from the NTIA, which was part of the President's initiative. And so by December of 2025, in two of the most underserved broadband counties in the state, we will not have an area that is unserved with broadband, which is an incredible accomplishment for us, and we're really proud of that. So we're really trying to take advantage of these federal dollars while they're available, and we're a small staff of 3, and I was telling Samantha earlier that it has worn us out, trying to do all of the grant writing and all of the grant admin, but we realize that these opportunities are once in a lifetime, to one of the earlier speakers' points, and are really trying to capitalize on both partnerships and public investment.
Tom?
Great, thanks. I'm going to try to squeeze in just an overview of 2 related spheres of work, but with an eye to the clock here. So we focus on clean energy development and mine reclamation as 2 really key economic drivers, and we're expanding that to include a resilience model that focuses on climate resilience, downtown revitalization, reclamation, recreation, et cetera. And the first thing I want to speak to is we're working with 5 communities in Southwest Virginia, which is kind of the epicenter of our economic development work. We do work that impacts 5 states that I'll speak to in a minute, but we believe it's really important to go deep, to build momentum, to show impact, and that's how we move forward and do this work at a larger and larger scale. One of the 5 communities we're working with, just to provide an example, is Daint, Virginia, and that's a place, former coal community that no longer is sustained by the industry, where we have worked with an array of business people, residents, local elected officials, to initially transform a brownfield site into a state-of-the-art campground with trail access, a playground, et cetera, and have worked, and speaking to the kind of visioning and master planning I referenced earlier, to bring in so far $2 million around a Daint downtown master plan that's going to include a number of elements, but one that's particularly exciting is taking the county's first ever power plant, the steam building in Daint, and transforming that into a state-of-the-art workforce development center and remote work site. So those are the types of things that communities are extremely excited about advancing, and we're looking to bring down a lot more federal funds for Daint and the other 4 communities that I just mentioned. I'll speak very briefly to the Appalachian Solar Finance Fund, which grew out of an effort to convene together with a local educational institution, the University of Virginia at Wise, and a community action agency, to convene local stakeholders, elected entrepreneurs, school districts, et cetera, to put together a package of solar projects that could bring in a developer, actually begin to build a local solar workforce, locally led, and form apprenticeships through the community college system. We've been able to get solar on 11 public school roofs in the Southwest Virginia area. And the Appalachian Solar Finance Fund sort of grew from that initiative. We were able to pull down a power grant from the Appalachian Regional Commission, with gratitude to the ARC folks here in in the room to help jumpstart an effort to provide catalytic grants and financing to community-scale solar projects right on the cusp of penciling out, but not quite there. And as a result, we've created 20 jobs across 5 state regions so far. This is really just getting off the ground with $2 million committed, leveraged over $13 million in private investment, sustained over 100 jobs that had more projects not been added to the pipeline, might not have been sustained. So from the community visioning and with the Invest in America agenda, we're able to have an increasingly large impact through these types of projects.
That's great. Okay, so mindful of time, team, this is going to be our last formal question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So implementation is hard work. I think I've heard you all mention things like capacity, funding match, permitting, community engagement. There's workforce is another item that comes up, but would love for you all to talk a bit about what are some of the challenges to implementation that folks in your community or organization are facing, and how are you helping overcome them? So starting with you, Colby.
For sure. Well, I'll start here. I know Hannah's in the room from Kentucky at Grant Ready, Kentucky, so everybody's well aware, especially with infrastructure projects and the match share. It's a significant hurdle, and I credit Hannah and the work she's doing at Grant Ready. In Kentucky, we passed our first federal match pool, and this past, I think there's $200 million in that as the first one, which is a huge accomplishment, and 80% of it's earmarked for local governments to go. So I think there was a clear priority for these types of projects as the federal money was coming down. It was after a successful pilot that Hannah led from House Bill 9 that was on a much smaller pot, but was very much oversubscribed. So I think that's an example in Kentucky of how we're overcoming that specific one. The only other barrier I'll mention, the broadband space, you sit down and you talk with county judges or mayors. They know they have an issue. They hear from people every day about, why does my internet not work? But it's very technical. It's very complicated. And I want to credit, haven't seen them in the room, but there's some organizations, some NGOs like Connect Humanity and Rural LISC that have done a really nice job of giving community leaders leverage when they sit down at the table with providers, whether that's mapping, financial analysis, just to arm them with enough to be dangerous, to make sure that they can have a higher level conversation around, you're saying this, but I know this, to be able to dig in a little bit more. And so I think that work's been really beneficial on the broadband side in our part of the state as well.
That's excellent. And I should make a plug that today, NTIA will be opening a $1 billion notice of funding opportunity for the digital equity program, which is going to be a huge moment to reduce or hopefully eliminate the digital divide. And I hope many of your organizations and communities take a look at that. Okay, plug over. Luke.
Yeah, where to begin? I think, I've kind of worked on the local government side. I've applied for my share of, EDA grants and have the scars to prove it, with nothing but love to my federal family. And then I was, at the White House with Samantha, thinking about how do we get these funds down to the communities that need them most. On both sides, it's a challenge, and that's, big part of the challenge is just timing. So for the communities that are eligible for these programs through the infrastructure law and the IRA, it is very hard, especially for a part-time mayor, probably doesn't even have a grant writer. They're trying to do a lot of different jobs at once to really know, they have a good sense of their problems. They don't know what the resources are that match their problem, and they certainly don't have the time to compete for a grant, put those 40 hours of time into the grant and not win it. So we kind of built this platform with partners. So Bloomberg came in and brought together funding partners, to provide the financial resources, implementation partners. So we work with the National League of Cities and the Conference of Mayors to kind of design a curriculum that makes sense for local governments. And then we brought in an amazing group of expert partners in each of the grant areas. So we talk to the Electrification Coalition every day to help us know, okay, which grants are available when should we launch our course so it'll be most relevant. And so it is a challenge to know, okay, when should we put this in front of a community? But we work really hard to kind of build a program, basically, the hub, this boot camp program that is timed to when the opportunities are live. And so, we can maybe go into it more in the Q&A, but we've got, coming up in September, we've got BRIC, RAISE, flood mitigation assistance, IRA direct pay. All of that is being kind of offered at the time where it makes sense to get those grant applications in to increase your chances of winning.
Excellent. Thanks, Luke. Leasha?
In addition to the capacity and the match issue, we did reach a lot of match issue situations because we've gotten so many federal awards, and we have been able in the last couple of years to convince the state of West Virginia to participate in our federally funded projects because we have both private sector and federal capital that are going into these projects. And so we've convinced the state that it's important for them to be a partner in our economic revitalization. But I think, and this is, it could be touchy, but I know that, my colleagues in the room that are from coal communities, cultural acceptance has been a real issue for us. We live in I come from a community where, you've heard Senator Manchin say so many times that West Virginia coal helped power 2 world wars and the Industrial Revolution. And, the culture of coal miners in southern West Virginia and all coal mining communities, I'm sure, is very strong. The fabric of those communities is very interwoven in the work that they've done. And so the discussion by folks like me from an economic development perspective of a post-coal economy and a just transition, it's been a tough narrative, to advance in our communities. We recently, about 3 years ago, entered into a partnership with a solar developer to build a 100-megawatt solar farm on one of our reclaimed surface mine sites that our agency owns as a result of the land use master plan. And so it was really only, I really only had the ability to garner public acceptance of that by, trying to convince the community that we can't recruit new investment, we can't recruit manufacturers to a once coal vibrant community if we're not able to offer, some percentage of renewable energy that's being generated in our community. So it's been an uphill battle, but I think we're finally getting there, one step at a time. But it's been that cultural acceptance that's been a real barrier for us.
Tom, can you speak to some implementation challenges?
Certainly, yeah, and I think the challenges that have come up time and again in these conversations, I really want to think about those in the longitudinal context of this work. And folks have been working very hard in communities for decades and decades to seize opportunities, to build wonderful things together. But the trajectory that we're on now, which is an unprecedented steep trajectory upward in terms of investing in our communities and doing creative and generative things that can make a lasting difference, that in many ways started with the Obama Power Initiative that's been referenced, the Power Plus initiatives, which became the Abandoned Mineland Economic Revitalization Program, and working with funds like those as a catalyst and creating demonstrations and building momentum. Many communities that have been engaged in that at that time were really well positioned to both ask for and then effectively deploy the order of magnitude greater level of funds that became available under the Biden administration. And I think looking at why that was possible informs how we need to sustain it and where we need to go from here. It was possible by working together in communities and also working together in national coalitions, working with government, with NGOs on the ground, with philanthropy, I really want to give a shout out to the Just Transition Fund. Rachel's here in the room, for seeing that power opportunity during the Obama administration and saying, okay, we need to be sure that communities are actually resourced to take advantage of this federal resource. And that was incredibly insightful because obviously we face that same challenge now, and I'm grateful for lots of help from philanthropy that has allowed us to seize this opportunity, has allowed us to create these examples, but obviously the dearth of capacity in things like grant writing, convening, just getting the word out there that this is a thing, that these opportunities are available, that we can do new and different things. That takes a lot of boots on the ground capacity that we need to continue leaning into. I'm going to speak also, just for a moment, to a fear that I don't want to sort of impact the trajectory of this work because, we met a year ago in April with folks from the IWG, and you talked about how the hardest work was just beginning at that time. The implementation was really just hitting the ground. And so that means that right now we're about a year, a little more than a year, into the real work. I think that there's the possibility of some anxiety around in this important year, an election year, et cetera, around whether all the players are going to remain as audaciously committed as we are now, particularly the federal government. We're continuing to bet big. I think that's really important, continuing to be guided by optimism and that positive ambition for communities. But I am interested in thinking through, how we can lean in such a way that it encourages all the other key players, philanthropy and government, to continue leaning in similarly.
Excellent. Okay, well, we have about 5 minutes left and would love to open the floor to questions for our excellent panel. I see one right here. I think we have a mic runner. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, me again. I am super excited about what all you are talking about, and particularly Luke. I love that Athens project myself, and I'm always talking it up. And I think also, Tom, you mentioned like putting together a package of projects, and I think it's like instead of equipping every part-time mayor with their own grant writer, what Athens did was put together a package of projects, and these small town mayors just had to raise their hand. Yes, we want that too. And so it's very efficient. But the flip side of that, and I'm wondering if you're thinking about that, is, and going back to what Colby said about leverage, community leverage, like when you have a project to do 58 different electrical vehicle charging stations, you've got some purchasing power to, put in some provisions for your RFP or, in order to maximize benefits to that project. And I'm wondering, Tom, Luke, others, if you're thinking about like how you're going to go about doing that and take advantage of that purchasing power and leverage.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's always fun to hear how other folks are thinking about the projects we talk about. I'll just start and then turn it over, but certainly kind of winning the grant and then having the money, that's the beginning. And then there is all the work of procurement, compliance and reporting, all that we know, with going, feels like ancient history, but going back to the rescue plan, those dollars that flow to communities, we offer something called the E311 program, which helps specifically on compliance and reporting. So we actually bring folks from the federal government, from Treasury, into sessions with smaller communities to kind of get their questions answered in a kind of one-to-one basis. And we're thinking about kind of what form of support that would look like for all the new grants that we've been doing. But we do a lot of work, especially on procurement best practices, and we share that on our resource page at localinfrastructure.org. But I can turn it to my colleagues if they wanted to jump in there.
I'll just say that from the federal side, I think we've recognized that one of the ways that you can expand and leverage capacity is by encouraging that kind of regional collaboration and partnership. And so you see this in a lot of the EDA programs where they encourage those kind of diverse coalitions and partners to come to the table, where you're able to take expertise and capacity from private sector, university, philanthropy, government, and kind of pull it all together. On the transportation side, several of our programs, our Reconnecting Communities program, had a whole section of it that was dedicated to kind of regional collaborations. So it's a trade-off. It requires, in some cases, more coordination and more work and more governance to be able to figure out, with all of these people at the table, how do you make decisions? But at the end of the day, I think you're absolutely right. You get more purchasing power, you get more leverage, and you're also able to take advantage of all of the different things that folks bring to the table. So we love to see that when it works.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And I should have mentioned earlier, the Appalachian Solar Finance Fund, managed by Appalachian Voices, is, as you know, a program of the Central Appalachian Network, and funds from the ACT coalition helped to boost its ability to get out there and provide those grants. And so I think in the same way that having those deep local conversations ensures that every element of a project, and not just what the project looks like when it's finished, but how we get there, who's doing the work, what materials are being used, et cetera, maximally benefits the community. And those are natural conversations to have when you're chatting with folks at the local level. Everyone wants to have that conversation. I think in the same way, if we're able to have really good regional conversations behind the projects that we're advancing, that's a natural space for the opportunities to lean in on regional supply chains, regional labor if we can't get local labor, et cetera, come up. But I think it's a really important point and something we need to be sure that we're thinking about as much as possible.
So I see we're at time, but want to see if there's maybe one more question and then we can wrap. No? All right, well, please join me in thanking our fabulous panelists. I learned a lot. Thank you. And thank you again, Brian.